Hey everyone, thank you for joining our 25th Sochology Eduseries. My name is Mudassir Bungash, and as always, I'm joined by Amna, our technical director. We have a very special guest for you today, but before we get started, just some quick announcements and housekeeping. Soch Cafe Karachi is happening this Thursday at Folio 3 HQ in Karachi on the topic Orchestrating Product Launches That Rock. Soch Cafes are in-person product manager meetups where PMs connect, discuss a topic, exchange ideas and experiences, and it's also a fantastic networking opportunity. So visit our LinkedIn page, look for the Soch Cafe Karachi post, and register in order to attend. And if you haven't already, start following Product Soch on LinkedIn so you can know where and when the next ones are scheduled in your city, as well as be updated on our other event streams. For this session, whether you're joining us from LinkedIn or YouTube, please post your questions into the chat and we'll bring them up towards the end of the session. Our guest today is Janna Bastow. Janna is the co-founder and CEO of ProdPad, a product management and road mapping software for product people. She is also the inventor of the Now, Next, Later roadmap and is co-founder of ProductTank and Mind the Product. ProductTank is a global community of product managers, and their chapters now span over 200 cities across the world. Mind the Product hosts the world's largest product management conference with annual flagship conferences in San Francisco and London, attracting thousands of attendees each from all over the world. Jana often stops conversations with the question, what problem are you trying to solve? And today she'll be guiding us on outcome-led road mapping. Jana, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Over to you.
Wonderful. Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. And thanks everybody for tuning in for this. I look forward to your questions today. Drop them in as we go, and I'll definitely get to them at the end of the session. Today, we're going to be talking about outcome-led road mapping. So what is this lean road mapping that we talk about? And I'm going to be also grappling with OKRs and how those relate to your roadmap. So just, I mean, you've already given me a great intro. Thank you so much. But just to round that out, as you said, you might know me as one of the founders of Mind the Product, which is the big community of product people. You also might know me as one of the founders of ProdPad, which is the product management platform, which includes road mapping and idea management and customer feedback management. And it's designed to help teams forge best practices with the product management processes, designed to help you extract value from your backlog and make sure that you're making the right decisions as you lay them out on the roadmap ahead. But along the way, I've also done a ton of training and mentoring and consulting and teaching in the product space as well. Now, you might know me as the person who talks about lean road mapping and now, next, later, and ditching timelines. But it wasn't always like that. I mean, let me take you back. I used to have really bad roadmap habits. I mean, this is actually an example of one of my old roadmaps from years ago where I faithfully reproduced the feature wish list of our company into a timeline roadmap that I could present to our team and to our board. And frankly, I wasn't the only one doing it. I mean, here's a screen grab from a Google image search result for product roadmap. You'd have to forgive a young product manager like me for choosing a timeline roadmap as the format of choice if these are the examples to go by. So it's the product manager who makes the roadmap, but where do bad road mapping habits actually come from? A lot of the time, they come from external pressures. Our bosses and executives, our sales teams and investors who ask product people to make roadmaps full of features and dates and promises and put pressure on them to deliver, as if we can absolve them from the questionable decisions that they've made about the business model and resources, like selling things that don't yet exist. And then when the roadmap fails, it looks bad on the product manager, but it's usually not the product manager who has a say in what goes into those failing roadmaps. I mean, no wonder that a product manager was once called one of the unhappiest jobs out there. So I don't blame anyone who's become a bit disenchanted with their roadmaps or who've had roadmaps filled with promises but actually deliver failures. So I'm here today with one goal. I want to change your minds about lean road mapping and OKRs, about outcome-based road mapping. And I want to give you talking points to change your minds about them, change your team's minds, and give you a guide to getting your team on board. And starting tomorrow, you're going to be more prepared than ever to give your teams product direction in a really lean way. So, we're ready to go?
Yep.
All right. So, let's break this down. Why are roadmaps letting us down? I mean, this is how a lot of roadmaps look today. And I know that this format makes you look great at times. Your board and your bosses love when you give them this level of certainty, but it's setting you up for failure. You see, if you deconstruct this format of the roadmap, you basically get a chart that maps out time versus things to do. And you have time on the x-axis, creating this timeline. And at first, it seems pretty easy and intuitive to use, especially in the short term. But the further out you plan, the more you put on there, the harder it becomes to manage. And because that timeline sits at the top, always marching forward, no matter what you put on that roadmap, everything under it, everything on it, always includes a due date and a time estimate just by the format of this roadmap. And so, what could go wrong? Well, you end up with these made up release dates that forces your developers on stressful marches to get things out on time. And then you end up with sales and customers with expectations that you just can't meet. And because you're so blinded with what you were looking to build based on what you had in mind 6 months ago, you end up missing opportunities in the market and often just downright building the wrong things. And often those things are stacked with tech debt as well. And this leads to you being a sad product manager. So we don't want that. Is there a better way? Yeah, of course there is. That's why I'm here to talk about lean road mapping. That's where lean road mapping comes into play. And the really key word here is lean. Lean is really about the build, measure, learn cycle. And the key bit is the learn part. This is essential to the benefits of lean, and it allows you to apply your learnings to ongoing iterations. Now, I would say that your roadmap is a tool to help you learn and iterate, but at the product strategy level. And so, put more succinctly, I would say that your roadmap is a prototype for your strategy. So, to show you why and how, when you go to build a new feature, you wouldn't run straight in with a fully designed interface that you put together from your head, from scratch, and started coding it. Because almost certainly you'd end up building the wrong thing. You'd start with some basic sketches on a piece of paper or a whiteboard, and then you'd take that sketch and you'd show it to a colleague or to a customer, and they'd give you some feedback. Maybe they'd tell you to move that button over here or add a bit of copy there to make it more clear. And the thing is, you'd throw out that sketch, you'd crumple it up and throw it out, and you'd make a better one, taking on board the feedback that you learn from until you are reasonably sure that you understand how the feature is going to solve the problems at hand. So you rinse and repeat, taking on feedback over and over and over again. That's the process of prototyping. And so a roadmap can be similar. With product management, it's not your job to know the whole strategy and just lay it out and run at it. The same way it's not your job to just come up with features and run at it and code it. Your job is to ask questions and get collective insights from people around you. At the roadmap level, what this means is taking your understanding and your assumptions of the problems and opportunities around, and then checking it with others, right? So you're saying, we think this is one of the problems, and this is one of the problems, and this is one of the problems, and I think we're going to tackle them in this order. What do you think? And people would come back to you with feedback on that, and you'd iterate on it. So it almost certainly means making iterations on that and learning from those iterations. It means that it's strengthening your roadmap every time you get a chance to bring it in front of different stakeholders in your team or even outside your team. So just like prototyping, the value isn't in the roadmap. The value isn't in the prototype. The value is in the process. It's in the road mapping process. And so fundamentally, a great product manager, their job is to lead their team in a collaborative road mapping process and use a flexible roadmap format to capture their assumptions so that they can be checked regularly. Now, one fundamental thing to remember that each of you listening in here, product is a big unknown. Each of you here is building new unknown territory. There's no blueprint to follow. There's no right way to do this. It's more like you've landed on a new unknown shore, and you know that you need to get to that big gold top mountain range in the distance, and you have to pick out the best path along the way. So your job is to realize that you've got certain resources with you now and to pick up more resources and knowledge along the way so you can make it to that mountain range. And it's up to you and your team to survey your surroundings and decide what it is that you have and what problems you need to solve as you go. So every product is a unique journey. No one listening is building a product that's been built before, and no one listening in is building the same product as somebody else. So this is where the concept of horizons come in. I mean, you're standing here at the present time, what we'd call now. You can see what's keeping your team busy right now and what problems are right in front of you. It's like you landed on this new shore and immediately saw that there's a bear right in front of you. I mean, that's your first problem to solve. It's crystal clear, and unless someone sees a different, bigger problem, you better start thinking of ways to solve that problem. But you can also see way off into the distance, that mountaintop that you aspire to conquer. You want to get up there. Now, there's probably problems to solve up there to get there. I mean, maybe something to do with keeping warm or getting ice climbing gear. But that's too specific right now. Like, you can figure that out when you get closer. You're a long way off, and there's a lot of things you can do as you get there to gather resources and knowledge. But if there's known chunky problems like get up the mountain, you need to note them down so you and your team can keep an eye out for ways to break them down and solve them over the course of the months and the years and the journey ahead. That way, when they're finished with the bear in front of them, they know which direction they're heading off into once they're done. And the thing is, you can also see off into the middle distance in various directions to various levels, degrees. There's lots of different directions your product could take. And how well you can see depends on how well equipped and what your starting position is right now. Who's on your team? What resources do you have? So you might spot opportunities to take advantage of that will help you along the way to reach your ultimate goals, or problems that you'll need to overcome or avoid. Maybe there's a glistening city full of money and resources that you could reach, or maybe there's a bog that you'll need to avoid and get over. Now, there's probably, almost certainly, multiple paths you could take through this journey. And from where you're standing, you don't really know which is the best one. After all, the further things are in the distance, the less certain you are about them. It might be faster to build the bridge, but maybe it means you miss the uplift in resources you'd get if you went to go visit the city. But from here, maybe it's a mirage in the desert anyways. And unfortunately, you can't just whip out your phone and pull up Google Maps. I mean, this is uncharted territory. No one's been here before. There is no right answer. But some answers will be better than others. And the best answers come from teams who regularly regroup and get together and lay out what it is that they each see on the path ahead and make sure that they're still on the best path. So they're communicating. So these horizons translate to a product roadmap. So instead of a timeline, which is a single date-driven line marching forwards, think in terms of these three buckets: your now, your next, your later. So on the far side now, you're granular about your focus and your scope. I mean, this is the stuff that's being prototyped and tested and built right now. And then the other far side, the later column, is much less about specific initiatives and more around outlining the problems you think need to be solved in order to fulfill your vision. Now, if you're setting off on a journey like this, you can imagine a team might immediately start bickering because they haven't yet agreed on what it is that they're trying to achieve. They all know that they want to reach the summit, but they have no framework for measuring their success and therefore whether to know they're working on the right things or not. After all, if you've got no way of saying whether you're working on the right things, who's to say whether you're working on the wrong thing? So road mapping without objectives can be chaos. But why do so many teams give up on OKRs? It's a really sore spot for a lot of teams. Let's dive into that. I mean, OKRs stands for objectives and key results, where objectives are your high-level qualitative measures, and the key results are the more specific, measurable, time-bound measures that are tied to those objectives. Now, the concept of OKRs is that the company sets the top level objectives, often called the North Star metric, and then the team then works together to decide how they can help contribute to that goal. So this is vastly different than the old school way of doing management, where you think of management setting goals for each team and then micromanaging that process. It means that it's using the knowledge of the whole team to set goals, which means that gaps are more naturally spotted and filled. The team can work more autonomously and isn't held up by limitations in time or knowledge by that middle or top management. I always think of it a little like that scene in Fellowship of the Ring when they're looking at that huge task of getting to Mordor. One of them says, you can have my sword. And the other one says, you can have my bow. And the other one jumps in, you can have my axe. Each one looks at what they could contribute and offered up what they could, and basically until all the gaps are filled and they had enough resources to set off on the journey. Likewise, let's say you were setting a company goal of maximizing revenue from a particular market segment. You'd have each team stepping in to fill those gaps. Marketing might say, we'll attract the right sorts of customers. And design might say, well, we'll make a delightful onboarding that converts and retains those customers. And development might say, well, we'll build a solid platform and deliver in a way so we can iterate often. No one person or no one team is responsible for that North Star, but the whole team together makes it happen by discussing and collaborating. But there's a term you'll need to know in the OKR world, and that's initiatives. And for some reason, it's like the forgotten middle child. I guess because Oikers doesn't have a good ring to it. An initiative describes the specific activities or projects the team's working on to influence the success of an OKR. So even if you identify what you need to achieve, which is the objective, and that should be based on the company strategy, and determine what good looks like, which is your key result, you're not going to get very far if you're unable to clearly communicate the actions you plan to take in order to get there. So that's your initiative. So let's use this as an example. Let's say you want to improve your overall health to avoid illness or injury. That's your objective. So you might have a key result. Let's say you're measuring progress by something like lose 15 pounds by the end of the year. And for this key result, you're not just going to lose the weight by willing it away. That's not how it works. You have to do something, right? So you might set an initiative to introduce regular exercise to your schedule, or refactor your diet and start eating well. And chances are you're going to have to make progress on both of these initiatives so that you can hit your goal. And within each initiative, there's probably a number of things that you can try, which I'd call experiments, all of which might take some time to see some results from. But one of the big problems that people run into with OKRs is OKR drift, because a lot of OKR systems miss initiatives. Basically, what happens is people set up their objectives and key results in one place, in some spreadsheet or an OKR tool over here, and then they go off and do their day-to-day product work in another space. And what tends to happen is that the OKRs get forgotten about. And when the team goes back to update them at the end of the month, the OKRs aren't as relevant anymore, as the team's been learning and iterating over in the product space and wasn't looking in the tracking space. At the end of the quarter, they go back and they realize, oh, the OKRs don't represent the stuff I work on every day, or we move so fast the OKRs can't keep up. It's one of the reasons OKRs often fail in teams. I hear people saying stuff like that.
Yep.
So one of the solutions to this is to tie your OKRs in with your roadmap. And a solution to that is this lean roadmap, this now, next, later roadmap that's tied to your objectives. So each of the blocks, the gray blocks here, are what we'd call initiatives. These are the problems to be solved. And they're put in order of when you're going to solve them, starting with the now, the next, and the later. And then each one is linked to your specific objectives, which in turn is connected to your key results. So this is one specific configuration, and you can see in this one, it's actually broken down by the experiments and what's in progress. This is one configuration, but I've seen people do it in other forms as well. So another layout that's really similar, but it's grouping the initiatives specifically by objective. Now, the value of this roadmap format paired with these objectives is that it takes the focus off building features and hitting delivery dates and helps your team strive towards solving problems. Now, I know what you're all thinking. You're all on board with this here, what I've told you, but you're going to have lots of questions and pushback when you take this to your team. The biggest question I get about this every day is, how do I get my team on board?
Yep.
And the real answer is that it depends. This wouldn't be a product management talk if there wasn't an it depends slide in here somewhere, right? But it depends on the context in which you're operating. Who are you getting pushback from, and what are they making arguments for and against? There's nuances here, and I'm not going to have time to go into all of them in this really quick session, but I can tell you that there are things you can do to convince your boss that deadlines won't make you work faster or better, or that you can show your investor that they're wasting their money if they want you to work in that waterfall way, or you can get your sales and marketing teams on board with a better launch and customer development flow, so they're not always waiting on you and the devs. Or show your customers that you still have vision and are creating value, even if you can't promise them delivery dates of their pet features. So rather than going into each of these now, I recommend you head to this guide that I wrote. It's completely free download that you can grab. It's a 6-page guide on ditching the timeline roadmap and includes a whole section on that last page is all about getting tricky stakeholders on board. So grab that URL, head over and take a look at that. It does cover how to get your boss, your salesperson, your marketer, your customer, everybody on board with it. And I also know that having examples on hand can be a really valuable tool in getting your team on board as well. So we've actually launched a sandbox version of ProdPad where we have example outcome-based lean roadmaps, OKRs, ideas, feedback, everything all tied together in a freely editable space. So you can show off to your team to give them an idea of what it is that you'd like to do with your own roadmap. So with this guidance, I hope that I've helped at least a few of you today make the move away from your old roadmap habits and in with some new, leaner ways of working. I hope I've helped you. If you found this interesting, I'd love to hear from you. Get your questions in on the side there, or reach out to me. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, email, Twitter. But thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Janna, that is, I think, a total radical way of thinking about roadmaps.
Great.
I mean, yeah, I just had like a couple of questions pop into my head as you were talking. I'm curious, like, what has your experience been like with teams who have implemented this when, they're actually talking to senior leadership? As we know, senior leaders are usually looking for timelines and targets and things like that. How do you convince them that, hey, you know what, like I don't have timelines for you right now? And I know that 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 is kind of like a really bad thing to say to senior leaders, but how do you reconcile that, or how do you convince them?
Yeah, so I mean, like with any stakeholder, if somebody's asking for something and it doesn't work with the way that you're working, you need to understand why they're asking for it,
Mhm.
right? If they're asking for a timeline, a deadline on something, ask why. What is that tied to? Is it that they are putting in deadlines because they think that if you don't have a deadline, you're not going to get the work done? In which case, you're objection handling there is to point out that actually you will get the work done. Your team will actually likely work better and faster and provide better code if you don't have a strict deadline by which it has to be done by, but instead show them that you work to internal milestones and deadlines. So I'm actually all for deadlines as long as they are internally
Okay.
driven. So having a good pace, right? Showing that the team every week delivers something, every 2 weeks does retros on stuff, right? Show them what you are able to deliver and build up that trust. But if they're saying, here's this piece of work and it has to be done by the end of the year because the end of the year feels like a good round number, and you're saying,
Yeah.
well, we don't actually know how big this is. So if you tell us to have it done by this date, it might fall apart. You might actually get a less good version of it. So are you prepared for a less good version? Obviously not. You want it to be a good version of it, not have, tech debt and all that junk. So do you want us to help figure out whether we can scope it down, or what do you want us to do with this? So you can work with them to figure out what the constraints are. You might work with them and find out that it's actually a regulatory, externally driven due date. At which point, you know what? Sometimes that has to happen, right? We don't
Mhm.
live in la la land where there are no dates ever. When GDPR came into play, everyone had a card on the roadmap saying this is due by this date. Because if you don't hit that date, you are possibly going to get fined. And if something does have a date, in order to hit it, you have to put in the extra work to do the project management planning for it. And it just takes up more time. It sucks, right? It's not easy doing that. And it takes up your team's resources. The problem comes is that when teams give themselves dates for things that don't have dates, right? If you're giving yourself dates
Mhm.
for things that didn't need dates in the first place, you're having to do that project management work and all that extra buffer time to make sure you hit that date on time. And what happens
Absolutely.
when you add extra buffer? When you add that extra buffer, teams take longer to deliver things. And ultimately, it slows down your team. So a team who's forced to deliver on like hit this date and then hit this date and then hit this date actually delivers less and at lower quality than a team who's just told deliver these 6 next things as fast as you can. This one has to be on one particular due date, but the rest can be flexible. They'll get it done faster and with higher quality. And sometimes it might be that uh, they've messed up with the business model in some way, right? They've
Mhm.
allowed the sales team to make commitments that they probably shouldn't have. They've sold things that didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
At which point you need to have a good stern talking to with whoever it is who's running the company and ask, are we running an agency where you take orders from our clients and we just go build them? At which point you're just outsourcing discovery to your customers and hoping that maybe something in there is good. Or would you
Mhm.
like me to do discovery as the product person and figure out the big juicy problem to go solve and spend the next few months figuring that out so that we can sell something to everybody and not just to this one client, right? So you've got to figure out why they're asking for that date and then figure out how you're going to push back on that. The guide that I wrote does cover this sort of thing in more detail.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and it'd be great if it's there's some kind of research out there that shows that not specific, I guess, to maybe product management, but that deadlines actually lead to, bad products or like, lack of productivity. All right, we've got some comments and questions in. So JC says end of year, most arbitrary and frequently used deadline. I think we're all kind
Yes.
of guilty of
I
that.
totally agree with that. And
Yeah.
you know what? To double down on that, I want to go after quarters in general, right? So we've got this arbitrary thing called a year. We break it down in 4
Hmm.
quarters. And
Yeah,
actually, if you think about it, everyone knows that Q4 is not nearly as productive as the rest of the quarters because
absolutely.
everyone sort of bunks off for Christmas. And yet we sort of say, well, here's our plans for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And sometimes, the quarter that encompasses summer gets a bit thrown off because some business B2B businesses get thrown off because of that, right? It's like, why are we working in these arbitrary sets of weeks? One of the things we did here at ProdPad was we actually only did this earlier this year and it's been successful, which is we've switched that up for more arbitrary tracks where we say in sets of 6 to 7 weeks. So 6 weeks of doing uh, delivery type work, right? Where we're saying we've got 3 sets of sprints. Sprints are 2 weeks each, and then 1 week where we do like a reset, review, retros, and plan for the next one. And the thing is that these things can start at any point in time, right? So it allows us to say, actually, we're just going to skip the week of Christmas and not try to have something bridging over that. And
Hmm.
instead, we're going to start one at this point in time, and we're going to carry it from this point to this point. And it allows us to have that flexibility where we're saying we can still say at the beginning of this period, we're going to try to achieve this type of goal. And at the end of this period, we're going to look back and see if we achieved that. And that worked really well for us. It doesn't have to be a quarter because, frankly, a quarter is too long for a lot of companies as well. You can achieve a lot more if you break it down into smaller sets. So we've gone with 6-7 week pieces, but
Okay.
your results may vary. I put a post out on LinkedIn the other day, and I heard tons of other people coming back with everything from 3 to 9 week different variations that were working for them. So ditch the calendar, ditch the year-long calendar. I think that's the trend now.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, we've got a question here. Let's see if we can try to understand this as a group. So, how to fill these types of term plates? That's the first time I've heard that. When one feature feeds multiple objectives, and how to show the sequence in features.
Yeah. So if I'm interpreting this, it's
Mhm.
when you're filling out a now, next, later roadmap, you've got a particular initiative that has multiple objectives. You can have, I mean, in the ProdPad format, the format that I was showing you, you can have a single initiative with multiple objectives tied to it. So that way, when you're looking at it, you can say, well, why are we doing this? Right? This initiative, what's the why? And it should be in those colored tabs at the top. And it could have 1, 2, 3, probably no more than 3 different objectives as to why it's going to be solved. But you can basically say it's going to be tackling that. And actually, when it comes to sequencing it, if something does actually solve 3 core objectives that are important to the business, you probably want to tackle that sort of thing first. But your own ordering might vary because there might be other things that are more important to tackle. But ultimately, what's really key about that roadmap format is that it allows you to lay everything out with those colored tags at the top. And you should
Mm.
be able to take a step back. And let's say you know that the green tags mean revenue, guys, revenue growth. The blue ones mean user growth, and the red ones mean retention. You should be able to see the trends in your product strategy. Is it that you're focusing on user growth and then retention and then revenue, or are you doing revenue and then you're going to worry about retention later, right? You should be able to see that just by taking a step back and without having to read everything on there immediately.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think one kind of overarching theme is like the traditional roadmaps, even though it's on a timeline, it doesn't actually show you the value of things that you're delivering, right? And the priority of things that you're delivering. I know it sounds weird, even though it is on a timeline, you're not able to tell priority. You're just going through, okay, well, this is what we're doing next. This is what we're doing next. This is what we're doing next, but not the why. Why are we doing this next, right? That never comes through with traditional roadmaps. You're just talking
Yeah.
dates. Um,
Yeah, exactly
is
that. And that's actually one of the key differentiations between the timeline roadmap and the now, next, later. It's not actually just the timeline versus the time horizons. It's the fact that you're taking that step up to talking about problems versus
yeah,
features. Because the temptation is to put features on the timeline roadmap because people are wondering when's that feature going to come out, when in fact it's more about, well, what problem are we solving first? And then within that, you can have the set of features or experiments. I actually like to call them experiments rather than features because an experiment is a broader term. Sometimes the experiment is to build a feature. I think if we built this feature, it would solve this problem and help us reach this goal. That's why it's on the roadmap. But sometimes it might be, well, I think if we changed this feature or even removed this feature,
hmm,
that would be a way to solve this problem and hit this goal. But it doesn't even have to be an experiment that's feature related at all. An experiment could be something that is related to pricing or packaging or proposition. Let's change the way we talk about this on our homepage. That could be a great way to solve the problem at hand and hit your goals. But
yeah,
what that's actually doing, it's getting the team to think less about the which features need to be delivered and when, which is what a timeline roadmap often gets them to do. They'll just deliver a whole bunch of features and
absolutely.
go, ta-dum, and not actually solve any problems. Whereas the now, next, later roadmap gets you to say, well, here are our problems. How might we, as a whole team, go about solving them? We're not just feeding this stuff into development. We're using our whole team's ability to think about how we might solve problems for the whole company.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So Janna, this was an amazing session, and myself and everyone online learned a ton on
Great.
behalf of our product community and the Product Coach team. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you for joining us. We hope you have a great day.
Wonderful. Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for everybody for joining in.